Let's do a little bit more AI. Let's talk to a developer who's leading a couple of product companies who's been building different solutions. What are his prerequisites? How is he measuring success? And what is necessary to build one that's successful? Cody Schneider joins me today on this bonus episode of The Business of Tech. Today's episode is supported by CoreView. Your customers need your Microsoft 365 expertise, and CoreView has the only M365 management platform designed for MSPs. Manage hundreds of tenants, automate manual tasks, and monitor compliance, all while intelligently comparing to the baseline. With a no-code control approach, CoreView revolutionizes your Microsoft 365 administration. This powerful platform enables automatic reporting and remediation, ensuring optimal performance and security. The best part? You achieve this high level of service without the need for a large workforce, allowing you to focus on growing your business through efficiency. Want to know more? Visit coreview.com/MSP and find out more. Cody, well, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Dave. Super excited to be here.
So I'm going to dive sort of right in. You've been thinking a lot about the way you can automate and enhance workflows using artificial intelligence. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing there and what your framework kind of for success and what you're looking for in the workflow space is.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the high level of all of this is that AI is incredible at taking unstructured data and structuring it. So, how I see the best implementations occurring currently is you look at a current process or system that an organization has, you audit that, you take a step back and you're like, okay, what tools can I implement within this workflow to try to automate it as much of this as way? And then this really enables, the humans that are involved in that process to focus on those human components. So using an example, it's like real estate and sales, right? A lot of paperwork that's typically happening on the back end of that. AI is a great solution for that paperwork component of, I have all this information. I'm trying to get it into this structured PDF format as an example. And then that allows for that, sales director, whoever is on the kind of the front lines doing those calls to focus on those high touch human parts of this business. And that's how we can, cut costs and also improve that efficiency within those companies. So I think that's the biggest thing though, is like that unstructured data to structured. That is what we're seeing be the most impactful things that these companies can do kind of, to begin with.
Now, when we talk about unstructured data, is it just chaotic mess of data
100%.
And we can throw it in there, but there has to be some prep, right? In order to get things to be useful, we have to at least take a look at it and understand we don't want to give everyone access to everything. We perhaps want to think about access controls. Talk to me a little bit about the process of data management that you think has to happen to be successful doing something with it with AI.
Yeah, I think on the data management side, of course, certain documents within the organization need to have the same access controls, et cetera. I think the bigger thing that, again, we work a lot in the content space, right? So a lot of our source data or source files that we're touching a lot of it's public information. Like it's a podcast, you could go and download it and transform it. But the bigger thing is that we can give all of this context. So as an example, say you wanted to write a blog post, right? And I go and I scrape the front page of Google for a target keyword phrase. So I get the transcripts from the YouTube videos. I get all of the blog post content from that. I put that in a context window and then I say, okay, write me a detailed blog post outline for this, for this target keyword. Writes the outline and then I can prompt it, now write the article. I don't have to structure that data perfectly on that basically first go, whatever in that context window to extract that knowledge. And I think that's the piece where I'm seeing, companies start to realize this and it's like, oh, I have all of these PDFs, maybe it's internal documentation on processes or, white papers that we wrote. I can take these 10 different white papers based off of this current client situation. I can now create a custom report or a custom output for them by providing this unstructured version of this. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can extract that knowledge and information and then transform it or translate it into the format that you're trying to get it. And I think how, especially when you kind of scale this up to a more technical part, even providing here's a JSON format, right, that I want you to output, almost that scaffolding. Here's the skeleton of what I want this document that you're going to generate to look like. and then providing that source material that it can then extract and pull from it. That's how, again, we're seeing these organizations basically take all of this disparate information and then consolidate it into a new piece of content or a new, whatever that ends up being within the organization. So,
now, one of the things that you mentioned, some of the interesting sort of sales scenarios, the workflow scenarios, and we oftentimes are hearing a lot of the sort of hype ones too. You also talked about like the content transformation ones. How are you differentiating between sort of that hype and practical applications for AI? Like, where are the areas that you find most useful, and what are your criteria for that?
Absolutely. The most impactful places that this can be. So like if I just go and I prompt the AI to do something, right? It's writing from its general knowledge. The general knowledge of the internet is very average. Where all of the value is in the tails, right? So expert knowledge has actually become more valuable than ever before. And so what we see as the real value is when you have your own data sets, you have your own libraries of content, you have your own, proprietary information that you're then using AI to, work off of, right? It's using its general knowledge to generate some type of new thing from that source material or files that you provide it. That is actually where all the value comes from. Like there's this, we see this right now in the sales component, like where it's like, hey, we're going to automate a BDR role or an SDR role entirely. Like you're going to not even have to employ this person. It's like, actually, probably not, maybe 5 years from now. But what's way more effective is like, what's a task that this person is doing currently that they hate doing? Like a lot of times you can just go into the organization and be like, hey, Jennifer, like, what do you hate doing on a daily basis? She's like, well, this is the massive time suck and it's mind numbing work. 9 times out of 10, we see that like there's some way to typically like automate or augment that workflow that they're currently creating. And that is where it's the most impactful. Like that is, especially on a team management side and make clients successful and happy. And I mean, employee turnover is like a huge problem, right? In the US, just looking within the workforce. If we can get rid of these things that they despise about their day job, right? Or going to work, that's a way for us to increase that retention. It reduces the costs on the HR department for, basically having those teams leave. And so I think that's, again, the things that we're seeing on the front line that companies are implementing that they're seeing success with and affecting their bottom line positively.
So it's interesting because you said in there, you talked about how knowledge is the most valuable stuff, and I would agree with you. By the way, I think expertise is bubbling up as even more important. And you also said correctly, and I would agree with you that like the average AI output is intensely average, right? So how do you view kind of bringing those two things together? If the AI's output is intensely average, but at the same time we're trying to make people and knowledge more valuable, how do you see those two working together best?
For sure. I think the expert level of this is you're training your own models, right? Like you're basically modifying the base models in some way for your companies. Stripe is a great example of this, where they basically took ChatGPT and then they fine-tuned it so that it was, the chatbot that you're working with internally it feels on brand, if that makes sense. Arrow Electronics is another huge company. They resell components. Same idea. They have like an internal tool that they built. It's just basically a fine-tuned version of that. The cheating way to do this, if you don't want to go fine-tune it, because it does take training data and just basically energy, right? Like which is one of the most valued commodities at this point. Everybody's fighting for all this GPU power, but the other way around this is you can basically, like, for example, say I provide this transcript and it has all this unique vocabulary within it. I can say, hey, use vocabulary from that source material with what you're writing. Also, here's your persona. So like defining what the person is that you're writing from, that angle. And then the other piece is then you can even like define the tone, style, and voice based off of, okay, the way I try to talk about it is like traditionally you would go make like a brand style guide as an example within an organization. You're now going to have like an AI style guide, same concept, but it's basically these base level prompts that your whole team is interacting with these tools with. And that's how you create consistency. That's how you can create better outputs. And again, it's like everything, and anything in technology we work with, especially on the data science side, it's garbage in, garbage out. Like content, quality is super. Whatever you provide it is super important to create like good outputs. But once you have that library, that back catalog of information or knowledge, it's very capable at understanding. Oh, like here's the language that it speaks in. Here's the context for me for whatever it is I'm working on or producing from an output standpoint. And you're just going to get a way higher quality piece of generated whatever it creates when you provide that source material that you have it that is to your standard, that is to your quality level, right? And to make a concrete example of this, like say you SEO was a huge thing that your company was doing. You're writing a ton of blog posts. That was like the way you're getting inbound traffic. You can go and show the AI, hey, here's all these blog posts. We'll say our top 20 best performing. Create a template outline that I can use in the future for how blog posts should be structured. Okay, cool. Now I want to go write another one. I take that templated outline and I take the language and the tone and the style and the voice, and I apply that all together into that composite. And what you're going to get from that, I mean, it's going to be in the top 10% from a content standpoint in comparison to if I just tried to one-shot single prompt the AI to write a document for me, right? It has context. It has more understanding of what the expectations and the outputs are. And I almost try to get people to think about it like, hey, it's a junior team member, right? Like as detailed and step-by-step as you can make it, that's how you're going to get the best outcomes from a generation standpoint.
Interestingly, and I'm going to shift gears a little bit because, and I'm going to have to give some listeners a little bit of exposure to the way this works. Actually, I get pitched a lot of ideas of topics from teams, and your team reached out with a really interesting one. And as I was prepping to get this ready, I actually have to disclose, I realized I was a customer of yours because one of the products you work on, Swell AI, is something that I use in my workflow. The reason that I wanted to talk to you was the approach you do to product development. So you've got a couple of different products that you work on, and you have a theme of minimum iteration. And I was really intrigued about this idea, and it's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show. Tell me more about this idea of minimum iteration.
Yeah. So, it's like every early stage company, like we just try to get things in public as fast as possible. I think very often, and I'm problem of this as well. It's like I know where this is going, and like that's that North Star goal. But it's like, what are these small steps to get there? And in reality, like you think you're heading north, but in reality, you need to head northwest, right? You're still going north, but it's in almost an entirely different direction. You're going to end up in a different place, but you don't know that until you take a step forward, right? And so, relating that to the product development side, that's how we try to approach all of this. Is basically like as fast as we can. How do we get it in the hands of the people that are using it? How do we get that feedback, back from them? It's the only way that we found to actually make things that people want to buy, right? Like we have theories about what people want to purchase, but in reality, until it's in the public and they can interact with it, you have no idea. And so that's how we try to lean into that. I hope that's what you meant on the minimum iteration side. I don't know if I took that in a completely incorrect direction, but
no, it is. And what I wanted to sort of is there some best practice that you've learned in doing this process that you can say, like, this is what you should think about? It's similar to minimum viable product, and it's an approach to development. Like, what's the best practice that you would tell to those that are thinking about this, particularly as they apply it to services that you've learned over the time using this approach?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, how I approach this and think about this is you're just trying to get it good enough. You can always improve that, right? But if I can get it 80% of the way there in 24 hours, right, and have that live and in the hands of people, that's going to be so much more impactful for my business than it's perfect a month from now, right? Like we're going to build this thing, and then we're probably going to have to take steps back because we overbuilt it, and then that just creates more dev time in the aggregate. But if I just put it in the hands of these people as fast as I could, and then allowed them to kind of finish, tie up the loose ends on that last 80%. This all depends as well, on the company size, and I've done work in, for orgs that are S&P 500. Like there's different rules, and the pace of all this can change. But if you're working with small businesses, right, like they're way more flexible. They're way more receptive to being like, oh, this is good enough. And then we're going to, kind of iron out all of the the wrinkles as we get this into public. But I think that, especially on client work, and this is just what I found, being in this world for so long, speed of action is like the biggest measurement of client satisfaction. Like if they ask for something or you promise something, like how quickly you can get that out to them is what's that's like the only thing that I've ever found to be directly correlated with reducing churn and the longevity of that client staying with you, right? And so when you think about that in relationship to the products or implementing these services for your clients, it's then coming back to, okay, well, what is even if it's not all the way there perfect, and this is hard for everybody, right? It's we want to do good work, and we want it to be, that's our work is basically a measurement of our value, like the quality that we put out there. But I think that especially with this newer technology, there's no way to make it perfect. Like we've even found this where it's like, every once in a while, it's just going to totally mess up, right? And we just have to kind of be okay with that. But again, if it's 80% of the way there, especially for these companies where it's like, oh, I just automated a salary away, right? Like, of course they're gonna be ecstatic, and also that creates just a high impact activity that you can do for these people. So, I think the biggest thing is that it's just like fighting like so many people are focusing on that perfection, but in reality, like building good product is iteration. Like it's that process of how many revolutions. My friend's in the wine industry actually, and he told this to me like 2 years ago. He's like, hey, I potentially get to go and make wine, 40 more times in my life, right? Like they see it once a year. And so for him, he's constantly talking to people to try to get as much information from other winemakers so that he can have more at bats, is how he described it, of like seeing more pitches, right? Because the more pitches you see, like the more likely you are to hit a home run or hit get on base basically. And I think it's that same idea when you think about iteration. Like you're just trying to see as many cycles as possible, because the faster the cycles can be, the better the outcomes are going to be. It's also going to feel like movement is happening for the client, and they see that progress, they see that progression, and that excitement creates stickiness from my experience within the client experience, whether it's a productized service or a software that you're selling them, et cetera. I think it's the same thing. People they want to be a part of something, right? And when they see that movement, they see that momentum, it feels like they're a part of something that's larger than themselves. And so that's a way to lean into it. A lot of psychological stuff in there, but again, just brain dumping all the things that I found to be relevant and related kind of, from during my career. So.
Well, you've worked with a lot of clients and you've talked about the different approaches. I want to ask then about like you mentioned you have to be comfortable with these kind of products being wrong. Now, for a lot of people that are very used to the technology being that very, that very regimented, you put it in input, you will get the same output every single time. This is very different than that. How are you finding it best to make customers and clients comfortable with that level of potential chaos, or the introduction of the is now less reliable in order to get to achievement? Like, how are you introducing and wrestling with that?
Yeah, so I'm positioning it in people's minds of like, hey, this is your team is now a curator more than anything, right? Rather than a producer, like you're going to lean on these tools to do all of the grunt labor, heavy lifting, right? So again, maybe it's data entry, maybe it's extraction of information from a huge data set, whatever that ends up being. Your team is now going in and they're doing the verification of these things to confirm that, oh, this looks right, this looks real, right? And for like what we see is like a lot of the time and money that's spent in most organizations is on that kind of grunt labor component of this. But if I can get that to where it's 90% of the way there, and then I have a 10x employee come in, and they get that handoff for that piece of whatever it is that I'm trying to produce. What we're going to see is like we can make that 10x employee a 100x employee, and suddenly we've just made it a company where it's like, say you have a headcount of 50 people. Well, this organization is now functioning like a 500-person organization. What does that mean to the revenues? What does that mean to the bottom line of these organizations? And I think that framing of like the AI is not perfect, right? But it can get good enough, like get things to a place where they're good enough that a human can then take that handoff and they can put all of the magic into that, right? And like we see this with content that it's producing, reports or whatever. Like there's these human that like it's like flair, right? That the AI is really, it's very hard to get it to do it consistently. We can get it to do kind of these rote, almost militant tasks very effectively, and they never complain. And they don't write a negative review about your company on Glassdoor. And so that is, I think, the framing that I'm trying to brainwash as many founders to think about is how do I make my team that's already exceptional? How do I make them perform like they're almost superhuman with augmenting them with these tools?
Well, Cody Schneider is the CEO of Draft Horse AI and Swell AI. He's known for his innovative approach to rapidly scaling startups and redefining digital processes through AI. His focus is on augmenting workflows and boosting human potential. Cody, I really appreciate you joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Dave. It's been a pleasure.
With as many breaches and security concerns as I report in this show, it should be obvious that cybersecurity is not just about technology, but also the human expertise needed to interpret and respond to complex threats. Huntress is focused on elevating SMBs and MSPs around the world. Huntress has a suite of fully managed cybersecurity solutions powered by a 24/7 human-led SOC, dedicated to continuous monitoring, expert investigation, and rapid response. And the proof is the execution. Huntress is the #1 rated EDR for SMBs on G2. Want to know more about the platform? Visit huntress.com/MSP Radio to learn more. The Business of Tech is written and produced by me, Dave Sobel, under ethics guidelines posted at businessof.tech. If you like the content, please make sure to hit that like button and follow or subscribe. It's free and easy and the best way to support the show and help us grow. You can also check out our Patreon, where you can join the Business of Tech community at patreon.com/MSP Radio, or buy our Why Do We Care merch at businessof.tech. Finally, if you're interested in advertising on the show, visit mspradio.com/engage. Once again, thanks for listening to me, and I will talk to you again on our next episode of the Business of Tech.
Part of the MSP Radio Network.